Hey guys, this is my run on Crevasse Hallowed Deaths Part 6, which is the first of 2 Shinryu difficulty fights. The strategy that I decided to use here is a counter-offensive strategy featuring the combo of Auron and Cor with Cor's FR, and for the third party member I had Machina. The main reason that I use Machina instead of any other characters with often damage is that Machina has a BT mode, and I can then actually use Machina's BT mode early on to help me charge my force gauge while freezing the boss's force gauge. You don't have to do that. Another option is to pop your summon, and you can even consider using a fast charging summon like Chocobo or Sylph, so that you can use the summon mode to freeze the boss's force gauge as you charge your force. Now, why did I place a lot of emphasis on this? Mainly because the key challenge in this particular stage actually is the fact that the bosses charge their force meter extremely quickly, because on top of the usual bonus to force percentage that they get, the bosses also get an additional 2 point something percent force gauge anytime you take an action. So that's why on a normal basis, even if you are maxed out on force levels on all 3 characters, the bosses will likely charge their force gauge faster than you, unless you do some hyper charging strategy such as using Luna Freya or Charlotta's S1, which is probably also another viable strategy here. But considering that there are 2 Shinryu stages, I wanted to try to do a counter based run on one stage and a no boss turn focus approach on the other stage, so that at least I guess there's a little bit of variation in the strategy. Anyway, on this particular stage, if you can, it's actually better to kill the boss before they enter force time, or at the very least, do not let the bosses get a turn once they enter force time. And that's because when the bosses hit force time, they enter it for 5 turns, and anytime they get a turn, then they will heal themselves for a massive 2.5 million HP per turn. So considering that there are 5 turns of force time, that equates to roughly about 12 to 13 million HP. So right here I decide to enter BT mode with Machina, and that's because both the force gauges are above 60%. So entering BT mode here allows me to hopefully hit close to 100% while keeping the boss's force gauge frozen. In a counter based strategy such as this, the ideal situation is that you enter your force time when the boss's force gauge is roughly between 90 to 100%, and that way you actually keep the boss's force gauge at that level, and when the boss's force gauge is above 80%, they also benefit from turn rate up, which actually helps your strategy overall. So keeping the bosses 90% or so is really ideal. I decided to use Machina's BT mode as a way to charge my force gauge while keeping the bosses frozen instead of summon mode, mainly because I was actually thinking of using Brother's summon mode when the force time is at 1 turn remaining, to give a little bit of extra oomph or extra nuke right at the end. But as you will see later on, it's really not even needed. I killed the bosses before I went to 1 force time remaining. So this actually shows that you can also do the same run with using a summon mode early on to help freeze the boss's force gauge. And in case you are wondering why the hell did I use Keiss and Seymour's LD call, the only reason for that is that I completely forgot that the bosses are immune to launch on this stage. So it's not a big brain play or high level strategy or anything like that. I was actually hoping to get a little bit of additional damage during Machina's BT mode by giving him Seymour's LD call, and then right as I was going through the fight, it dawned on me that the bosses are actually immune to launch. So I just decided to continue on the fight. On hindsight, if you are replicating a similar strategy, instead of the Seed Rains and Keiss LD call, try to set call abilities that debuffs the boss's defense, because I realized that on this stage in particular the bosses have quite a high defense stat, it seems. So I managed to enter force time just nice in the nick of time. You can see the bosses are at 98.5% force gauge, so any other action that I take will definitely cause them to hit 100% since they get a bonus 2% per action taken. So I did cut pretty close, and again, you know, if I actually did try this run a few times, and in my first few attempts I actually failed because the bosses entered force time before me. So don't do what I did. Maybe consider using your summon mode early on to help you hit force time before the bosses do. Once you enter force time, it is pretty straightforward. So what you want to do here is to take as few turns as possible, so avoid instant turn attacks like Cor's Reaper's Gale or using any additional ability or call abilities, because those just burns your force time turns away. You should also use Machina's Furious Blade's Burst whenever possible, because that attack actually delays Machina further down the line and results in fewer player turns taken. My party is fairly well built because both Cor and Auron has 5/5 ultimate weapon, whereas Machina doesn't have any ultimate weapon equipped because I actually dismantled my short sword ultimate weapon earlier this month. That being said, if you find that you can't kill the bosses in one force time, that's where the Brothers Summon is there for. So for some reason, if you decided to save your summon like what I did here, the idea is to pop Brothers Summon when there's one force time turn remaining, and that summon will do massive damage and probably help you finish off the boss. For this strategy also, you want all 3 party members to ideally be at force level 30, because every bit of force charging helps a lot. It is a very tight race to 100% force gauge between you versus the bosses, so your force levels have a very big impact on this stage. A little bit more about the stage mechanics. You can actually decrease the boss's force gauge percentage by 1 to 2% if you can dispel buffs on the boss. That's actually part of the stage mechanics. That being said, it's not very reliable because the only buff the bosses do is a defense up generic buff, and that's all. The only other buffs that they apply seem to come from their force attack, which is really besides the point. You know, you want to dispel buffs to reduce their force percentage so that they won't hit force time, so it's kind of a moot point that almost all their buffs come from their force attack itself. So this is the buff I was talking about, the generic defense sub buff. And in case you're wondering how I actually remove this buff, Auron actually has a Vanille Sphere equipped, so when he finally breaks the bosses, he'll actually dispel that buff, and that actually helps to reduce the force percentage a little bit. Removing that buff does actually help because, like I said, the bosses on this stage seem to have an inflated defense stat, and that buff just helps it boost the defense even further, so removing it helps a ton. You should also consider defense down debuffs, and maybe even something like Jack's LD Call. I know it hasn't been used for a long time and it lasts only for 4 turns, but on this stage it helps you to actually hit Cor's Force Conditional, which requires you to do 10,000 or more brave damage a turn.
想定済みだ。梅雨払いはしてやるさ。沈んでもらおう。想定済みだ。これで最後だ。じゃあな。責務は果たす。
So that's it for this run. As always, I hope the video has been helpful, and if you enjoyed the content, please leave a like, comment and subscribe. It really helps a lot. Till then, I'll see you guys in the other Crevasse stages. Bye!